Sometimes we can look good on paper. Our A1C could look good. We seem to be staying steady year after year with that average, give or take a point or two, which is not a big deal. Here are some reasons why your CGM and that A1C value that you're getting from the lab may not be matching. Not judgment, just good feedback that we can build on and make some changes if and when we need to. CGM estimate, say one thing, and then your lab, that value we get back after we get our blood work done, that A1C, says something different. Maybe your Clarity report, if you're on a Dexcom like myself, says 5.9. You're feeling like you're on target. It sounds like it's a good number, but your blood draw comes back at, say, 6.2. And suddenly you're questioning everything. Do we really know where we're at, what our average is, what our A1 is, with what our expectations are, again, around blood sugar control. So today we're unpacking why those numbers don't always match, what each one actually measures, and why pattern recognition matters more than perfection, always. Because your data is information, is giving us that feedback, but it is not your identity. And it is not a test score, although I can say over all the years, it gets a little stressful sometimes when we are waiting for that test result to come back, meaning the A1C, and then we are like, what is that mixed reaction that we can have based on that? Well, today I want to talk about this topic. It's something we all have to kind of think about, right? Recently, I see my endo twice a year, generally speaking, is when I get my A1C tested along with other lab work that I get done. So January of this year, just a few months ago, I went in. My Clarity report, again on the Dexcom G7 is what I'm using right now, it was telling me pretty consistently over this period of time that I was at 5.9%. And when I got my lab results back, I had a chance to get the sneak peek because I do get a chance to see it before I actually see the doctor, which is nice. It came back at 6.2. I was like, well, that's, it's a 3-point difference based on what we thought we know or where we thought we were with our average blood sugar. But it was a little surprising. And this is not the first time it's happened, but this is the first time I'm talking about it here on the show because I know this data that we get in this feedback can tell a lot about our relationship with disease, our relationship with our feelings about how we are managing things. And it really is, it's like a scorecard and it can be triggering for all of us. What I'd like to do today is to really to emphasize how important it is to not get hung up on those differences if this is something that you're noticing as well. But it is a better gauge in us reducing the swings of the blood sugar, the up and down, and I'll get into more of that here in just a moment, and to normalize this confusion. I think it's really important just to, if we don't understand where the data is coming from or what these blood results actually mean, then we can get a little bit overwhelmed with the information, and then we can walk away judging our efforts without really understanding really what's happening. So let's start with A1C. What does this measure? And this may go back to Diabetes 101. I don't know how long you've been living with type 1 diabetes. If you're listening here today, I just celebrated 44 years. And yes, celebrate because it's 44 years of doing this. It takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of focus and patience, right? So all the things, there's so many adjectives that we could say that it takes to live with diabetes and to manage it without feeling like we're going crazy some days. So A1C, this is what it measures. And this is kind of the scientific version, but I think you will appreciate this. So it is the glycation. It's measuring glycation. And this is the bonding of a sugar molecule to a protein or a lipid molecule. So in essence, a higher glucose level will increase the rate of glycation. So in essence, that is A1C percentage. So again, higher glucose means a higher or I should say an average 90-day average glucose will present as a higher A1c percentage. So that's how it's measured. So again, the A1c is a 90-day average, and it is influenced by the red blood cell turnover. So it's how much, I guess what you might even say, this is how I've understood. And again, this is not medical advice. I come on here to speak in my story and what I know and what I continue to learn, but it's that stickiness. So we don't want those red blood cells to continue to have sticky or that glycation on those sugar molecules. So we want obviously that to be lower, and that is reflected in our A1c percentage. So what does a CGM, or continuous glucose monitor, what is that measuring? So one of the data points that I look at, there's quite a few, especially on the Clarity's Dexcom's Clarity report, but the GMI, which is the glucose index indicator, this is the average blood sugar. This is basically what this is looking at. So it is measured on the interstitial glucose. That's a tough word to say. And it also is looking at real-time trends and is looking at time and range. So those are all the things that it kind of gives us. The standard deviation is another point that I really, really believe in. This is, I feel, is a true indicator of where you are on average. Our standard deviation, which measures the glucose variability. So this is how much our readings are going up and down. So it's not just where we're averaging, say, 130 milligrams per deciliter, but it's the fact that we're going up to 220, we're dropping down to 50. Again, I'm measuring this in milligrams per deciliter for those of us here in the States. I know there's a conversion factor for millimeters per liter for those of you in other parts of the world. But just as a reference. But the standard deviation, I really feel, is our overall. It's two things, I think, that happens in the doctor's office. Obviously, we're looking at data and we're measuring what it was in our previous visit. Sometimes we can look good on paper. Our A1c could look good. We seem to be staying steady year after year with that average, give or take a point or two, which is not a big deal. Or I should say 1/10 of a point or two, which is not a big deal in most cases. But I really think the standard deviation is a truer reflection of life with diabetes. So it is those swings that are really telling the story about how we are doing hour to hour, day to day, week to week. So the A1c may look good and pretty on paper, but what's happening in those moments before, during, and after, say, a meal, or when we're getting up in the morning, and all those different variables? Or how does exercise affect how our glucose is varying in number throughout the day and evening? So how much readings swing above and below the average? Again, that is the standard deviation. So a lower standard deviation is better, indicating stable, consistent blood sugar, while a higher standard suggests frequent drastic ups and downs, just like I was saying. And this is interesting too. A healthy target is a standard deviation less than 1/3 of the average glucose level. So again, this is another math problem for us to look at. So for instance, if your average blood glucose is 150, and that pretty much, again, milligrams per deciliter, and I'm sorry, I don't have the conversion factor here as I'm talking to use that as a reference for some of you to be comparing this. If I'm looking at 150 as my average glucose, then that standard deviation of 50, so a word of 150 would be 50, is considered a healthy target. And here's a few things to consider too: lag time and calibration. So these are a few points that I think are really important. It doesn't always get talked about in the doctor's office. So number one, so we're looking at our CGM data and how accurate is our data, right? We all know that there are some variations in that number, and timing has so much to do with that. Think about the power of this little device that we wear. It still blows me away. I've been wearing one now for about probably 20 years now, And again, it was a lot of finger sticks back in the day. I can remember not even having glucometers back in the day. So we've come a long way. But I think the technology and the accuracy, the tendency for accuracy, and there is no perfect, but I always say if there's a ballpark range that makes sense, I don't tend to calibrate. So that's another thing that I will do too, just to kind of true up the CGM. But if we talk about our CGM data and we're looking at that day in, day out, week out, and 3 months goes by, it's time to get our blood drawn for a A1c for the doctor. And suddenly we're seeing that difference. And this is what kind of opened my eyes to this conversation back in January when I got my results back, is I was saying, well, how accurate is my CGM? I mean, that reporting that is giving me that GMI, so the glucose index indicator, that GMI is only as accurate as the information the sensor is bringing in and uploading into that GMI report. So it's only as good as accurate as the actual blood sugar recorded is. So we really need to take that into account, that this is an estimate. It is not perfect. And in essence, when you think about the A1c, it averages and it comes to, like I said, that ballpark. It matches to a point. But I still think we have to keep that in perspective. We have to be looking at what it's giving us, the feedback it's giving us, what it does help us do, which is drives our decisions with our dosing and our activity and foods that we eat or don't eat based on what we know. And to me, that is gold. Even if it's not perfect, it is close enough to make informed decisions. Here is another thing to consider, and this is something that I'm hearing more and more about inside the T1D community, and that is soaking your sensor. So basically, and that sounds like we're dunking it in water. That's the first thing I thought of when I heard of this term. I'm like, what does that mean, soaking your sensor? But basically, before we remove a active sensor wear time, or a session, I should say, before we remove it, we are inserting a new one and letting that just get into interstitial fluids and to be able to get used to this, our body, and, to kind of create a home there, a comfortable, more accurate home is what I'll call it. I have personally not tried this, and I've heard a lot about it. I'll be honest, I don't want anything more to add to my plate right now as far as taking and removing and replacing devices. I'm on an insulin pump now, so less is more for me. And I think when I think back to what I was just speaking about with the accuracy of a CGM, overall, I'm very happy with the information I'm getting, and I'm able to live life decisions and feel pretty confident about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. At this point, I have not tried the soaking. So again, it has been talked about that it does improve the connection and the accuracy of that sensor cycle, which in my case, it's 10 days for the Dexcom. And I'm assuming that people are using other types of CGMs as well, not just Dexcom, but the Libre and then the Medtronic's product that is out right now. Anyway, something to think about. Another thing that really helps me, I don't always remember to do it, but to calibrate every morning. So getting up, again, we tend to check our sugar when we get up, just to seeing what the level is on the CGM. And if I remember to do this, I do a finger prick, get a number, and calibrate my system. Now, again, if this is something your system will take and accept and utilize, then it's a great way to, again, any way we can help the system feel more accurate and to kind of true it up. I think it does help. And I have noticed that when I'm consistent with doing this, that it does seem to help and matter. I do over time just randomly calibrate. When I first put a sensor on, so my first 24 hours, within 2 to 3 hours, this depends on where I'm at, and if I have a glucometer with me, hopefully I'm home, during the startup time of the new sensor, then I will calibrate. And I think, again, sometimes there's a little bit of variation there. So again, I think the system takes it, it accepts it, and it does help true up that number over that 10-day period. And again, if I can remember to Do that every morning. It can only help. So that is what I am sticking with. So here are some reasons why your CGM and that A1C value that you're getting from the lab may not be matching. So these are some things to consider that maybe even your doctor is not mentioning if this is coming up, if this is something that you're even thinking about or wondering about. So the number one, and these are things that are really interesting, is anemia or iron deficiency. It is a sign of inflammation, and low estrogen can lead to lower iron absorption. So while high estrogen or sudden drops, like in perimenopause, can cause heavy bleeding, resulting in iron loss. The low levels of estrogen, again, in the perimenopause, certain times of the cycle, and obviously in menopause and postmenopause, which is where I'm at, those low levels of estrogen affect vitamin B6, zinc, or healthy fats. And this hinders the body's ability to use iron, even if it's consumed. So even if you are eating an iron-rich diet, it's not just what you're eating, but it's what your body can consume, absorb, and utilize. So this is something really, really important to consider. If you want to hear more about lab recommendations and those tests that may or may not be pointing the doctor and us to really what's going on in our body, take a look back at episode 153. Talk with Kelly Schmidt when we talked about labs like iron and ferritin, and these levels that we recommend are top of your list as far as getting these lab levels measured, especially after the age of 40, because things change, and it's a good time to be taking a closer look at those. If there's other things happening, other symptoms that are starting to show themselves, this is kind of a good way to kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of the root cause of symptoms of and in perimenopause. So definitely look at that. Some other reasons why there may be differences. Again, we'll get back to what we were talking about, why our GMI or our CGM average blood sugar, why it's differing from our A1C results. Glycation differences. Again, that is a big thing. I think there's a lot going on with each of us, our stage of diabetes, our age that we are in, hormonal impacts, and all of these things. So looking at how the body might be absorbing and utilizing. Another one is the glycemic variability. So this is really important too, because and this is kind of a day-to-day type of a observation. When there's a lot going on, whether we are traveling, whether we are experiencing poor sleep, or we have more stress in our life, or there's a difference in what we're consuming as far as food, or whether or not we're staying hydrated. Again, all those things that impact blood sugar, all those things that impact how insulin can be utilized to its best efforts. So that glycemic variability, and like I was talking before, the standard deviation, that is where that's going to kind of show itself. So we're going to experience more sudden drops and sudden spikes if there's these other factors happening in our life that could be making the blood sugar vary more often, sometimes very dramatic. So again, things to consider. So even if that A1C is coming back at say 6.0, what's happening? What's happening behind the scenes? What's happening to you emotionally, with your relationship, with your life with diabetes? What's happening in all areas of your life? It's not just the number, but it's all the things that are impacting your day-to-day and your relationships with this number. So just some things to consider. So just to kind of recap, so what matters more is to understand the patterns. And I think this is definitely something we'll be covering in my book, Highs, Lows, and Hormones, hitting the shelves very, very soon. So stay tuned. And if you're listening to this in May, the books will already be on the shelf. So definitely be looking here in the show notes or reach out to me if you would like a copy. But this is a big part of the book, is not only understanding what's happening when hormones are changed, but understanding your patterns, your symptoms, and what to do with this information so that we're not feeling overwhelmed or feeling hopeless with the information. So again, symptoms, tracking that, and really seeing the true meaning behind exactly these variations in blood sugar. And like I was saying, what matters more than, say, the A1c or the GMI that that our continuous glucose monitor reporting is given is really looking at that standard deviation, getting closer to that number and really noticing the fluctuations in blood sugar as opposed to just that static grade or that static A1c percentage. Another thing to consider is time in range is what are your time in range parameters as far as what is your low threshold and your high threshold. So this could be something too to be looking closer at. Are they reasonable with what your expectations are or your lifestyle or the time of day? So these are really good things to look at too. Again, we want good feedback that's really going to reflect what we're doing and how we're doing it, not judgment, just good feedback that we can build on and make some changes if and when we need to. And again, the fewer swings. So I think if one takeaway today is standard deviation matters more than our A1c, and that our goal is really to try to stay calm pattern with our blood sugar the best we can. And I know this is difficult as the hormones are just going crazy, especially during the luteal phase and perimenopause. But trust me, just recognizing where you are, what's happening, why it deviates as much as it does, and trying to kind of scale back and figuring out some ways that you can correct this. Type 1 in Midlife is our group coaching circle. We meet once a week. We talk all about these things. We just unpack it, share where we are, share our thoughts, share ideas, because we're all in the community, absorbing the information and learning. And again, we walk away with not only support and ears to listen, but some ideas that we can utilize and put into action. So important. It's life-changing. And this is why pattern recognition matters more than perfection. And I hope that this is a takeaway for you today, is understanding the data, what it truly means, and to put it in perspective, right? And this is something I teach throughout the book. So I'm so excited. I can't wait to hold it myself. It's so close to getting to the publisher, made ready for purchase. So data is information, not your identity. And this is physiology. This is what's happening. These are data points that are measured somewhat differently, but really I think it's important to understand why there are differences and what you can maybe talk to your doctor more about if you are discussing any changes that are happening in your A1c. And if you're ready for the full roadmap, you can download the free guide right here in the show notes. I do talk about this topic in that. It is HRT and type 1 diabetes, looking at menopause therapy. It's a good way to get ready and warmed up for the book, because the book is going to cover everything 10 times more. And you get to stay in the loop when you download this free guide. So you can check that out. The link is right here in the show notes. And I'd love to have you help bring this message to more women. Be sure to follow the show. It means a lot. Leave a review. Let me know how these topics are helping you, what more you need to know about. And if you'd like to be a guest, reach out. I'd love to have you here on the show. You can share more about yourself and being able to touch more people here in the community, because we love hearing from each other. And be sure to share this topic with somebody that you know in the community and connect with them. So have a beautiful day. And again, CGM, GMI, standard deviation, all those data points, just understanding how they are similar, how they differ. And really the most important thing is to have a good relationship with our data and to utilize it to our best advantage. So have a beautiful day. See you in here next time.